Welcome to Quarantine Creatives. I'm Heath Racela. So today on the show, Jordan Carlos is here. Jordan is he's a comedian. He does stand-up comedy. He's a comedy writer. He's an actor. He's done a little bit of everything and still does a little bit of everything. He's really interesting, really funny, really smart. The way that I know Jordan actually is I used to watch him on The Nightly Show, and I missed that show, man. I didn't realize it until Jordan and I started talking, but that show really helped form a worldview for me in a way that I wasn't even aware of at the time. For those of you that don't remember this show or don't know what it was, The Nightly Show used to follow The Daily Show from like 2015 to 2016 on Comedy Central. It was in the 11:30 spot that used to be the Colbert Report, and when Stephen Colbert left Comedy Central to go take over David Letterman's show, they needed a new show in that spot at Comedy Central. And rather brilliantly, I think, they decided to give Larry Wilmore a show. It was a show like The Daily Show, where it kind of analyzed the news of the day, except the majority of the writing staff and the on-air correspondents were people of color. And for me, it was really nice to see news and news analysis and news humor told from a different point of view, to hear other people's take on what was happening. You got to remember 2015, 2016, this is the time when Donald Trump is riding down the escalator in Trump Tower. This is the time when there's, 17, 18, whatever it was, Republicans all competing for the nomination. This is the time when Hillary Clinton was running. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot to make sense of. And Jordan was on the writing staff at The Nightly Show, and he was also an on-air contributor. He had a couple funny characters that he used to do. Kind of the most famous was a frazzled Hillary Clinton aide that Larry would interview him, and this just happened at the Clinton camp. What do you think about it? And the character's name was Carlos Jordanson, and and Jordan would cut to him and he'd just be sweating or nervous, or he was always just sort of afraid of getting yelled at by an off-screen Secretary Clinton. But that show, it only lasted like a season or two. And Comedy Central ended up pulling the plug on it before the 2016 election. And I know for me, I was devastated by that. Like, I found the show to be very funny, but I also just found it to be so relevant and so helpful just for me to open my worldview up a little bit and to hear other points of view and just start to get an understanding from other people's perspective. And I think as the country has tried to make sense of the death of George Floyd, and people are out in the street protesting now and talking a lot more openly about race and race issues, I think that show is more relevant than ever. And I wish it was still around. I wish we still had Larry and Jordan and all the other correspondents just helping us make sense of the news every day, because, man, this is this is the time for it, I got to say. So Jordan and I talk a lot about The Nightly Show just because, again, for me, it was such a big influence, and it was a show I really cared about, and it's what got me first to follow Jordan. But he's had a great career since then as well. He's actually he's a comedy writer primarily now. He writes on First Wives Club on BET, and he's actually got a script writing class coming up, teaching people how to write a spec script for cable and streaming shows. If you don't know, spec scripts are, if you're trying to get a writing job, you write a script for an existing show that's already on TV, the existing characters and everything. You dream up what you would want an episode to look like, and you script it out, and that becomes a calling card until you've had a chance to actually write real scripts that get on the air. So Jordan's going to be teaching an online course. It's through the Pit in New York City about writing a cable or streaming comedy spec script, and he's got a lot of awesome people that are going to be dropping in on that course as well, including one of his Nightly Show co-stars, Francesca Ramsey, is going to be making an appearance in there. So definitely check that out. There's more info on Jordan's Twitter. He's at Jordan Carlos. But I really enjoyed talking to Jordan just about sort of his background, how he got into this business, and seeing it from so many different angles as a comedian, as a performer, as a writer. And the other piece of this interview that I didn't even expect to be a thing when Jordan and I first started talking about having him on the show is sort of the role that race plays in all the jobs that he's had, because of George Floyd, and because of sort of where the national conversation ended up going. It became more and more relevant, and it's something Jordan's been posting about pretty openly on Twitter. So we talk a lot about race in this episode, and again, in a way that I didn't go into this saying, let's talk about race in the TV industry. But Jordan has a great perspective on it. And I think if people are really sincere right now about wanting to correct some of the wrongs of the past, about wanting to be more open about representation of Black voices and other voices of color in the writing room, in the staffing of a show, in who you're putting on air, I think some of the insight Jordan offers is very helpful. And yeah, hopefully those of us that are saying on Twitter and stuff that we're open to listening, this is a great place to start listening. These are the types of conversations that should be happening, and I hope this is just the beginning of it. So here is my interview with comedian, writer, actor Jordan Carlos. You're down in New York, right? Yeah. How are things looking down in your neck of the woods?
Okay, everything is. You would walk outside the door and not know what was happening. I live in a very quiet section of Brooklyn, and I'm glad that we definitely avoided some of the more abrasive elements of the demos. I'll just say demos, and which is what America is all about. But there are certain side effects that I could do without.
Yeah.
And but we had a peaceful march yesterday, which was great, that we participated in.
Nice.
And it was cool, man. It was cool, But yeah, I mean, it definitely put a spotlight on the incongruities and the injustices in the city. I mean, I live in a very working class neighborhood that's very mixed racially and economically, and I think it's just kind of, there's it's very middle class, but and working class. But I feel that the places where you see the most tension in New York City are the most gentrified areas, where you just have, it is, oh boy, Simma.
Really? In terms of like the protesting and the activism and all that kind of stuff.
I think so. I think there's just another element to it, which is, to have your neighborhood totally radically reshaped and reformed, and to have this kind of like drumbeat of, high rents and high prices, just pricing people out, and then you add all these crises to it.
Yeah,
it just foments. It really does foment.
That makes sense, I guess. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about just sort of that pressure that's been going on for the last 15 or 20 years of gentrification.
Oh my God, yeah.
This feels like it could be a tipping point. So, like I know you through the Nightly Show. That was sort of how I first came to know you, and just
my God.
I missed that show, and I've missed it since it's come off the air, but like I really miss it right now. Like I just feel like the whole team over there, you guys did such a great job of sort of breaking down these complicated issues, and especially when it came to racial issues, and just sort of really dealing with that stuff head on. I'm just curious, like if you've thought about what would be happening if you guys were still doing the Nightly Show and there was a show last week or there was a show tonight, like what would be happening in the writer's room right now? What would the discussions look like, you think?
I'm sure it would be all about, well, first, I would just say that Larry was way ahead of this. He understood that the race itself in 2016 was greatly, there were people divided racially. It wasn't.
He called it the unblackening. I mean, that was how you guys branded the election.
He called it the unblackening, and I think it was a very bitter pill for a lot of people to swallow. They didn't want to believe that. They wanted to believe that they wanted to hide it behind whatever fervor there was in Trump's base. They wanted to dress it up as economic insecurity or things like that, which are all valid. These are valid reasons as to why someone would put their trust and faith in a certain candidate. However, we knew by and large by that point that it had more to do with identity than anything else. So, yeah, I mean, I it's funny. I think that a lot of people weren't really on the same wavelength as the writers' room and what people were putting out on the nightly show. I would just say that sometimes it was like, maybe it's our writing, maybe it's this. I'm usually the kind of person that, I blame myself and stuff. And hey, that's always part of it. It's comedy.
Yeah. And it's easy to go there too. I mean, that's the first place you go. Yeah.
The first thing, I never blame the audience, but I will say that it is crazy how many times I think about how hip people are now and how open people are now within the past just 4 weeks to the kind of message and programming that we put out there in 2016 and 2015 and the beginning of 2014.
Yeah.
Or the end. And it hurts my heart, really. I really feel like, that was a missed opportunity in ways, because I can think of right now. I mean, I saw Michelle Alexander trending. Michelle Alexander wrote an amazing book called The 13th. It was all about the 13th Amendment.
Uh-huh.
And in the 13th Amendment, there's a small part, that was carved out, I guess, by the Southern Democrats that said that within the 13th Amendment, even though it did free slaves, it said that if you were, in jail or in prison, and this applies today, that slavery can't exist within the penal system,
yep.
right? So that amendment let it remain a working, viable part of our society. So in that documentary, this thing I wrote about the roller coaster of emotions when learning about either a police-involved killing, or if someone, if there was a mass killing. What we do is we, as people of color, is we get in this roller coaster, and first shock and emotion and like, oh my God, I hope everyone's okay. Not this again. And then you wait, and it's like the lotto of whether or not the shooter is black or white,
right.
Yeah. And I remember Larry doing that and just crushing it, and I was like, and now, people are listening to Michelle Alexander.
Yeah.
Whereas before, she was just somebody on the academic fringe. Now she's trending on Twitter.
Right.
The problem was always there. It was just people's willingness to listen, thinking it was somebody else's problem. And I think now their eyes are finally opening to the need to dismantle so much of what our society is predicated on,
Yeah, I mean, just that term, systemic racism, it's not something that I've fully understood until really unpacking it, in the last week or two, I guess, because I'm majority white. I'm 75% white. My grandfather came over from the Philippines, but I identify as white effectively, and that's how I present to the world. I guess that's what I look like. So,
Sure.
It's just these aren't issues I've had to really think about or deal with. But I think you're right, just in terms of sort of the nightly show being so far ahead of its time. And for me, it was the first time sort of hearing some of these conversations, and really, I started following you on Twitter at that point, and sort of everyone from the show, Francesca Ramsey and Holly Walker, and because I love the message. And it was one of those shows, I love The Daily Show and I love Colbert. And I used to watch the first act, on YouTube the next day, just the monologue sections. And maybe if the guest was interesting, I might stick around for the end of the show. And I found with the nightly show, I would go out of my way to watch the entire show, just because I love the panel discussions. I just there was so much in it that it was stuff that I was hearing talked about openly for the first time really on national television, it felt like.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's sort of a shame that it doesn't feel like there's a forum like that right now for, the majority of Americans, I guess, to go and sort of hear from voices that are new to them, or from perspectives that they're not used to hearing.
Sure. I mean, that is valid, man. And that's the sad part, is that, but that is television. Television, you're trying to take art and commerce and merge them, and sometimes it just doesn't work out. And I don't know. Hey, I'll put it this way: I'd be down for a reboot. If there were a reboot, I could jump back in. because I know how we would handle these things. I know we would handle them with a lot of like humor. I mean, I thought like, you know, the looting that happened here in New York City, all I could do was look at it and say like, oh, okay. I put some correspondent out front of Macy's and say that like, you know, even in the time of looting, you know, New Yorkers, they love a good deal. You know, they're not not up at Bergdorf. They're down at Macy's,
right.
You know, that's for that 5-finger discount. I think like there's just ways to laugh through horrible times.
Yeah.
You know, I think of these. I've always thought of this one. I love history a lot, and there's this old photo of these two black infantrymen in World War II. They were shelling, you know, like a 50 cal, were shelling this position and I'm guessing like France or something like that.
Yeah.
But it said on the shells, it said Easter eggs for Adolf. You know, it was like, these people, you know, people have still found ways in time, you know, to get a laugh in, you know, even when they're facing certain death.
There's something too about comedy, I think, that just, it can allow truth to come out in a way that sometimes it's hard to deal with when you go straight on, right?
Oh, for sure. You know, you need humor to, it's like somebody tell a joke, you know, somebody tell a joke and all this to relieve, if not momentarily, just the pressure of today.
Totally.
Really.
Yeah. And it's the need for it is stronger than ever right now. And it's so strange. I feel like just sort of having all these racial issues really come front and center at a time when there's this pandemic going on. And so like when you sort of need to laugh the most, you've got a couple of comedians, you know, holed up in their houses producing some late night shows like with an iPhone or whatever. Like there's just not that there's not that outlet, you know, right now. And it's
certainly. I think there's an outlet for people that are just being, you know, and I'm you know, just saying that are unapologetically black or who they are, you know, like I feel like oh my God, something I wanted to do for George Floyd, you know, with all respect and may he rest in power. I feel as though, you know, you could have done a sketch where it was like the perfect victim pageant, you know what I mean? Where like you have to find the perfect victim, and like Miss America, you find the person that best represents, because it seems like people are not able to take in a victim, or they are suspicious of someone unless they are perfect.
Right.
And that's the same thing that happened with Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks is handpicked to be who she was, you know, to serve the function that she served. There was a woman previous to her that did the same thing, but she was a lesbian. So it was bad for business, you know? And that kind of like understanding that about ourselves, which is why we get things like Michael Brown and the New York Times saying he was no angel,
right?
Or somebody like Candace Owen looking into George Floyd's past, which is just, it's so disgusting that I would love to make a joke out of it. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, totally. Yeah. I'm with you. And it is that sort of, the victim deserved it in some way, you know? And you see that across the, like, you know, it's the rape thing, right? Of like, well, how were you dressed?
We want an unimpeachable victim, right? We want an unimpeachable victim because if anything less than that, they can be thrown to the dogs and, you know, whatever. That's what it is.
But even then, I mean, like, look at Tamir Rice, like how a 12-year-old, like, you know, or the kids at Sandy Hook, you know, like first graders, like, it just stuff doesn't change, even if you have, you know, you get the most perfect, you know, innocent person in front of it.
Of course. I mean, what you want to believe, the pretzel logic of it all, right? I mean, I think both sides, everybody, all Americans do it. We love somebody despite their flaws and foibles, doesn't matter. I think like I was listening to this you know, I've been kind of like paying attention to this thing with Alison Roman, a chef named Alison Roman, who had beef with Chrissy Teigen, and there were racial implications.
Right. Yep.
And then they, you know, racial implications, and then somebody found a photo of Chrissy Teigen dressed up as like Pocahontas for Halloween, and it's like, oh my God, you know, it's on and on. But will we? Is Chrissy Teigen going to get canceled for her behaviors? You know, like,
right.
I think that the even like the purity test of it all has us going loco, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but I do know that the proceedings are hilarious.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd love to dig into. If only there were the nightly show back.
It's so weird too, just thinking about like the arc of television, that like, when we were younger, like a show got canceled and that was it. And now it, like,
Yeah.
Curb Your Enthusiasm has done like what, 10 seasons, but across like 20 years. And you're just like, how does that math add up? But and like by the same token, Survivor's got like 45 seasons or something. And you're like, didn't it start in like the 2000s? Like,
Yes.
So I want to sort of dig into your origins a little bit too. What's your background? Like, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Dallas, and hold for applause. And it was just a really, my parents gave me a great childhood. Just it was very, they were very nurturing. They're great people. They come from classic American backgrounds. My mother was her family they were farmers in Mississippi. My dad comes from like a tradition of like auto workers in Michigan, and somehow, some way we found ourselves to Dallas. But I think it was a good med school. So my dad, after med school, you have to, you do your fellowship, and so he did that in Dallas. And so we were all kind of like fish out of water. We're like, what the hell is this place?
Yeah.
What is Texas? But we made a home there, and I got really into comedy when I was in high school. So I started off doing improv, and I also love to draw. So I was the editorial cartoonist
cool.
at my high school newspaper. So that kind of got me into jokes. I was one of those kids that was like into Calvin and Hobbes, man.
Yeah, totally.
Man. Yeah, fuck the man. And then by the time I got to college, I wanted to try comedy all the more, and I did improv in college. But by the time I graduated, I realized I'd love to write jokes a bit more. So when I graduated, I started doing stand-up comedy, and then that made no money.
Yeah.
So I just got a job in advertising, did that for a couple of years, which was fantastic.
Was this in New York at this point? You're like a Madison Avenue guy?
This is Madison Avenue. I was a Madison Avenue guy. I worked for a company called McCann Erickson.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. They paid great. Very madman, but had to leave. Because it wasn't my dream, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of ad people do this. There's a lot of comedians that have started off as ad people. Jim Gaffigan is a great example, and I believe that Bob Newhart was in that guy's one.
Huh.
Yeah,
I didn't know that with either of them. That's interesting.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of rejection,
yep.
just like in comedy. There's very little thanks.
Yep.
And there's a lot of similarities. So I saved up $5,000. That's right, Heath, $5,000, and I quit to do comedy full time. And then I passed the Burning Sands, and a couple of years later, I started to book roles and things like that, and I became Stephen Colbert's black friend. They hired me to do that. That was kind of nuts, and I got like an agent and a manager from that.
Oh wow!
And
were you on air for that, or was that just like, because I've seen the bits with the photo where it's just like the photo of Stephen with you? Did you have some on air things with him too?
I was on air once or twice,
okay.
But it was insane, and those things keep you floating. Like you're just like jumping from floating igneous rock
to
igneous rock,
just trying not to touch the lava.
Yes. My God, it's trying to keep those knees up in the air, and
right.
Because it's New York City,
right?
They're not kidding around with the rent. So anyway, I swung from one vine to the other until I was on a TV show called I Just Want My Pants Back. Before that, I was a host on a Nickelodeon show. So I've done a lot. And but I would say that probably the most formative job was the nightly show. That definitely, gave me a real education into creating and producing television, and what it took, and how to convey yourself on screen quickly, and how just going for the laugh, trying to then instill a message after you get the laugh, etc. And it was a great group of people, man.
Yeah. How did you get involved? I'm sorry. I was just curious, like how you got involved with them. That was, that feels like such an important piece of your career arc.
Like most things I do, I stalked the guy that was running the show.
Yeah.
So I have this weird thing where I just kind of like in comedy in New York, you hustle a lot and you eat what you kill.
Right.
Right. So not to be too florid about it, but yeah, I found out that this guy was going to be on this panel about like green solutions in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And
is this Rory or is this someone else?
Rory Albanese.
Okay, sure. Yep.
So I track him down to this panel discussion. I'm literally the only person under the age of 50 there,
Yep.
And I would also add that Norman Lear was on the panel.
Oh, wow.
So it was like these two titans.
Yep.
So I had to kind of like figure out questions for them that I both get their attention, but not make it look like I was monopolizing the time, like in the Q&A. So yeah, after that was done, I didn't even talk to Lear. I was just like, you're too great. And, I probably turned to a pillar of salt and, if I talk to you. So I just turned to Rory and I was like, I hear that you're starting this show, yada, yada, yada. And he was like, yes, come to my office tomorrow and we'll talk some more about it.
Wow.
So, yeah. So I went to his office and Rory's the kind of guy, I was prepared with notes and things like that, what to discuss and like practicing in the mirror. And then he just talked for an hour and a half. Yeah. And then he had me come meet Larry and they talked for an hour and a half. And I was like, I'm going to get this job. And then Larry was like, so do you have like a writing packet or anything like that? I was like, oh God, I don't. So went back into a corner in New York City. You have to think on your feet. And I said, why don't you come watch me do stand-up comedy instead? Then you'll see my writing in action.
Right.
And they were like, okay. So they came to the show, or I was put on a Comedy Central showcase with about 30 other comics, really very funny people. But for some reason, I don't know if your listeners know this or not, but an industry showcase, it's almost like a variety show of comedians. The producers will decide, they give the thumbs up or you'll be thrown to the lions.
Yeah.
And then I was the only one who got an actual good response from the audience that night. It was a horrible audience. It was horrible.
Yeah.
It was terrible. It was like they'd been sent there. They were all like, they had the energy of methadone addicts. Ooh. They were just terrible, man. And so I don't know what happened, but I blacked out. And when I came to, I had a job.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I was very lucky. And after that, I kind of let the experience wash over me. And I decided to kind of like take what I learned and then input that into narrative,
Yep.
Like just making maybe smaller stories, but stories that do carry the same weight because they're imbued with things that I learned at the nightly show.
Gotcha.
And became curious about. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, because you've been writing. You did like a show for BET and stuff, right?
Yes, I wrote on a show called First Wives Club, which is the reboot of the old Bette Midler movie. But it was so fun to write on that because it's like it's these three devil may care black women that are up to hijinks and just having a hell of a time, and it's they get into all these predicaments. It's very it's like Golden Girls but younger.
Yeah,
I like it. I really like it, and you'd be surprised how political comedy can be. I mean, in the best way, that big issues of the day come into play in the story, So that was cool. I really like that. And before that, I was writing for a show called Divorce on HBO with Sarah Jessica Parker, that was a pleasure to write for too. And that one, it was just more or less about, I guess for a lot of people, disillusionment, the dry rot of the the upper middle class, white upper middle class, which I grew up watching and being kind of like a almost a witness to, kind of like one of my favorite characters is probably Nick Carraway from The Great Gatsby, because he's in it but not of it,
right?
And always kind of like little on the outside, watching what's going on, but you could bring that what your stories to bear in those spaces and on that show, and I got to do a lot of that, which was fantastic.
That's so cool. So you've been a writer, you've been a comedian, a stand-up comedian, you've been a performer. Which of those do you prefer, or do you need a good mix of all three, either creatively or just to pay the bills, or like?
Well, everyone knows millionaires have 3 streams of revenue.
Yep.
Everybody knows that. All right, but I feel like writing's my favorite thing to do, but I couldn't have done it if I hadn't acted first. So that was the most important building block, because when you act or you do comedy, you just learn how people speak generally, because you got to mimic that, and then by doing stand-up you understand the metrics of comedy, what's going to make people laugh and what's just not going to make people fucking laugh. Right. and then you just inject that into the scene so that the scene becomes real, it becomes like authentic, but I just wrote this show about this really fun script that it's called Holmes, and it's about a man that he's a corrupt police officer in a place called Bayou City, which strangely looks a lot like New Orleans.
Yeah.
And in it, the corrupt cop sustains a horrific injury, right? Horrible injury. Gets into a coma for 7 years. While he's in the coma, his nurse is listening to the complete works of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, and keeps calling him Holmes over and over again. But it's like homeboy, homie, Holmes.
Right.
When the man wakes up from his sleep, he thinks he's Sherlock Holmes, but goes by Homes, Holmes. Yep. Right. So now I'm in a world, in this Bayou City world. It's completely corrupt, and is a kind of like my love letter to the childhood summers I spent in New Orleans.
Yeah.
That's what it is, right? So it's a wacky world, but people are normal in it, which is what I had to learn, which is what I learned from comedy. And then you can input that in your writing, It's how the comedian responds to the situation to create situation comedy.
Right.
So even in the first scene, I always wanted to be like a New Orleans homicide detective. I wanted to have a name like Zizou Boudreaux, like just be on, who knows what side of the law I'm on,
Yeah.
But but they call everything the police there. Everybody calls it the police, So like, we the police. I remember hearing that one time, like, don't mess with me, we the police.
Yeah.
And I was like just in awe of these guys. Anyway, like one of the conversations that this guy, the bad cop has, I call him Zizou Boudreaux, is he comes in, his life is being threatened. His captain, Honoré Baptiste, his life is being is on the line, and Honoré says something like, "Oh, they were both given bullets in the mail. One guy's bullet is the captain's bullet is the biggest, and the captain says, "Oh, you got the fun size." Why they call it the fun size? When I get a Snickers bar, if it's smaller, I'm not having more fun. I want a big size. And then he's like, "Forget about it. I'm just rambling," like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that kind of thing, I love to put into a script, because people don't speak. They take tangents. They go off this way. They go off that way. And no place I know will teach you that more than stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
The risking of it all.
Right. So, I mean, that's a stand-up bit, right? That you kind of took a stand-up piece and put it into a script there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's what's fun about it. And the room, and the writer's room is so much more fun, I feel, than a set, because you're allowed to try and to make a mistake.
Right.
And it's okay, we're kind of like creating this exquisite corpse of a story together. We're cobbling it all together, you know. That I like that a lot more. I mean, stand up is great. It's just sometimes, you're foxhole friends with people, and it's a moment of individual achievement, which I, for one, it's Heath, it's cold out there. Let me just tell you. It's cold out there. It's nice to be in a writer's room.
Yeah, and I think just to have, just to be able to bounce those ideas off people too, right? That like when you do a set as a stand-up, you unless you have a really good friend or someone that's listening to it and says, I don't know if this part's working. Like you kind of have to check that yourself, I guess, right? I don't know. I haven't done stand-up, but that's just sort of my sense of it from an observer, I guess.
Oh, for sure.
But yeah, in the writer's room, you can be like, hey, what if it's this? And people can say, nah, I don't know. Or, someone else can say, oh, but what if it's that's good, but take it
Yes.
that way. Take it
Yes.
make a left turn instead of a right turn there. And,
Well, it's the yes and of it all, too.
Right. Yeah. Which is your whole background, right? That's improv.
Absolutely. And it lets you do that for other people, not just to have it, feed your psyche, but, you can help other people along with their jokes. Cause, just cause I've been in spaces where people are like, that idea is great. The only thing wrong with it is it didn't come from my head.
Right.
And so I have been fortunate to be in places where that is not the rule, and it's more like people are willing to listen to different ideas, hear them out, see what floats,
Right. On that sort of idea of the writer's room, you wrote a Twitter thread, I think about a week ago, just sort of talking about being the diversity hire in a writer's room.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit and just sort of what your experience, I guess, with that role?
Well, I think before I say anything, I would say that a sociologist would do a much better job with this than I ever would. Give a great TED talk on it. But I do think that it creates this situation wherein, or what's incentivized and what is put up with really is showrunners or the people with the power that, with the power. Let's say they have a distaste or a disdain, or maybe not a disdain, but they do not prefer the company of people of color, at least them being on their staff, right? I mean, that's just the truth. Maybe it's not aggressive, but it's one of those things like James Baldwin would say, like, I try to believe you, but I see what you do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure.
So let's just say that, the proof is in the pudding. For whatever reason, you hire the people that you hire.
Yep.
Right. What I've been told is people hire their friends. And it seems that they would only have white friends. So I've seen that before. But the point is that at the end of the hiring process, when all is said and done, there's this one nagging and annoying thing that the NAACP has successfully championed for, which is you must hire a person of color, right? Yep. And to make it palatable to the producers, the networks have taken the step of then paying for that writer themselves, so it would not even come out of the budget for the show.
Gotcha.
So it's free.
Yeah.
Which I think is just, it creates this unhealthy setup for the writer of color, right?
Right.
Like, because you're not wanted. If you were wanted, they'd come after you.
Right.
So it then creates this insane kind of bonanza among very talented people of color that are all vying for one job, when everything else on the tree has been plucked, man. And you are scrambling for that one plum. As I said in the tweet, it's a knife fight. It's a total knife fight.
And sorry, is that like with the producer and trying to get on the show, or is that with the people that you're competing against? Or are you even aware sort of who else is going for it?
You're competing against all these people,
sure,
that you're not even aware of. So it's giant Blackhawks. Somebody, I mean, and only one will win. So it's like Highlander, or like Conception. One of us is getting there. Right. We're all trying. One of us is getting there. Now, I think that, and I don't know why I have to think of this stuff, but maybe you hold some other spots up the ladder for people of color rather than the bottom. If you give them the bottom, then they'll always have an inferiority complex. Because it would seem to me that if we look at it logically, places are being held for white people, right? So why not just formally hold places for people of color?
Yeah.
Because they're informally being held for white people, right? So that happens a lot. It happens more than I think people like to let on, and there's a whole industry set up to groom people to get these jobs and to not want more than these jobs, because once you're given the entry level position, it's really up to you to make the most of it. Now, a lot of people I know or a fair amount have done well off these programs, but I don't think that they speak to, I don't think that they really speak to the insidious nature of structural racism within these giant mega corporations and these entertainment entities.
Sure.
Because it's just, as we know, the last hired are the first fired, and you will never gain the traction if you're constantly trying for entry-level jobs. Right. Or vying for entry-level jobs.
And just trying to kind of prove your value and your worth and your place there, right? I mean, that's sort of, if you weren't hired as part of that first round, if the producer didn't say, this is somebody I definitely want on my team, if, it's like being a little kid and your dad says, hey, go play with Timmy next door. He's a good kid. I don't want to play with Timmy. Like, what?
Yeah. Oh man. Timmy. Yeah. He's got nothing.
That guy?
That. Absolutely. I think what it is there's this constant, as I said in the thread, there's this constant pressure to perform for people of color.
Yeah.
Right. To not only, so you get in a writer's room. I've done this. I've gotten into a writer's room, and the rest of the people, God bless them, are just boring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you they'll tell you, and these programs will be like, you need to shine. You need to be you need to stand out. You're like, aren't I already standing out as the person of color?
Right.
I go in the room and nobody looks like me. That's probably, I'm going to stick out.
Right.
But this need for kind of like a hard luck story as well. And I think that, like, for me, I was told to tone down the story of like the fact that my parents were successful, because people don't want to hear that. What they want to hear is they want a sense of discovery. They want to feel as though they plucked you from the ash heap, as though they're the thing that's standing between you and chaos.
Gotcha.
So to me, it's I think that there's just, I don't know, man. There's so much work to be done, and I feel good that people are finally open and down to do this boring work of like dismantling toxic environments.
Right. It feels like, I don't know, in some ways I feel like Me Too is sort of tied up in all this too, of just sort of, I don't know, like our generation just sort of putting our foot down at a certain point with sort of all this crap and just being like, we've had enough of it, like whether it's sexual harassment in the workplace or racism or just like, I feel like prior generations, it was just sort of like, well, that's part of the job. You just put on a happy face, you got to put up with it. And I hope we're at the point where enough people are just kind of saying, yeah, this isn't working anymore. We gotta reform the whole structure here.
That's the hope. It's really, I think a lot of it is like, we need jobs. Jobs are a big part of our identity as Americans.
Sure.
And, you spend more time, before all this, we spent more time at the office than we did at home. And, I never fought with my wife when I was like, when you're working.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody that then goes home and fights with their spouse. It's
right.
like, you're like, I'm so nice to my spouse when I have a gig, everything's easy. You save all your resentments and your dysfunctional BS for the people that you work with.
Right.
Because that's, prior to coronavirus, that was really your family.
Right.
Which is why people, I think, kept wanting to hire people that they would say like, well, is this someone I'd want to spend 12 hours in a room with? Or is this somebody that I'd love to spend my weekends with?
Yeah.
You're literally shopping for family,
right.
which is insane to me. So, yes, this generation, I think, and I have to give credit to the Gen Zs and the millennials that woke up and said, you know what, just screw it. And if there's enough of us that are saying screw it, then you can feel safe to say this is not right.
Yeah.
And that can be even more impactful. Like, okay, so you've been experiencing this kind of backwards thinking for so long, and you've had this understood this dissonance that you can point out to people, and it's sometimes even more helpful, I think, or can add a plurality to the points of view of people that have been in an industry for so long and point it out,
right?
Point out what's wrong with it, rather than people that are coming from, they're just entering the whole industry itself. I think it makes for a greater chorus, and one of my friends, Sarah Ann Moss, she was one of the women who testified against Harvey Weinstein. I can say that she definitely, that powerful group of women, are changing business as usual in Hollywood.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And it's about time. I mean, these are just picture shows, dude. This is just, we're just making silly stories here.
Right.
Like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Why are these people treated like kings? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah. I hope there's change in the air around all this racial inequality stuff too. I mean, it'll be interesting to see sort of if this surge of energy and just activism, if that leads to a productive place or if it ends up fizzling, there's so many times where there are these movements that just, they have great inertia for a week or two and then they just kind of dissolve and you're like, what happened there? I hope,
a movement always takes time. A movement always takes time. I guess the NAACP was like founded in the early 1900s in Niagara Falls. And then you fast forward to like 1945 when you finally integrate the army and the armed forces, but that was after World War II,
Yeah.
So, and then you finally get to 60, it's like the Montgomery bus boycott is 56, then that was 56. Then the Civil Rights Act is like 1965. I'm sure those people were like, how long am I gonna keep marching? If they had like Fitbits back then, my God, man, they would have just blown up.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of it just takes time, and because there's so many iterations of not only a movement, but the backlash to that movement, the progress forward, and what we, and the slip back, I mean, a lot of people have said that Barack Obama was a Reconstruction president, and I seem to believe that, because at the end of Reconstruction came Jim Crow, and and this need for white primacy and this hysteria and paranoia that we see played out today.
Yeah.
I mean, I am through it all, even though I'm a Gen Xer, I'm tail end Gen Xer. I was born in '78. And we're like, pessimism is our love language,
right.
When I was a kid, there was no such thing as you were never to be ambitious. That was a thing for losers. Ambition was frowned upon. People that had like strategies and decks and things like that, you're like, who is this a-hole?
Right.
But then, you know what? The world was going to keep going without us. And I think that the generations behind us, they feel totally rooted in what they want and totally confident in their the ends, their goals and the means by which they achieve their ends, And I think that's really great. That's brilliant. I think Gen X people are like, but I could do this or I could do that,
right.
Or maybe nothing will ever happen. Fuck it, let's get a drink,
right.
Like that. Will one of us be in charge? I mean, Kamala Harris is the closest to Gen X that could possibly be in charge if she were vice president.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. But then again, she might get up there and be like, to hell with it. I don't know. Screw it, guys. Let's get a coffee. Come on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I am rear guard, but I am confident change will come.
Yeah. And like you say, it takes a long ass time sometimes. And
oh God.
We were talking about at the beginning, just the 13th Amendment. That's like, slavery's illegal, asterisk,
Except if you're on a chain gang. Yeah, totally.
I want to ask you one last thing, just sort of about the future of stand-up. And I've seen you're doing these shows, these kind of drive-in comedy shows right now, right?
Heath, I'm doing. We're addicts. Do you understand? It's terrible.
Yep.
It's disgusting. If it were any other substance or any other vice, let me just say, our loved ones would have talked to us by now. There would have been an intervention.
Is the addiction to laughter? Is that or just the feeling of being on stage? Where's the high come from?
All of it. All of it. The stage high a stage fright lasts, it can last like 5 minutes to an hour after you get off stage,
Yep.
It's great. It's a total Zoom, dude. And I'm so bad that I'm doing one tomorrow night on the back of a pickup truck in Astoria, the parking lot of a diner.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. I mean, these are the like you sound like you're, like I'm scoring some drug or something like that. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
The diner in Astoria. Yeah. Totally.
Behind the dumpster. Bring the money.
Yeah.
Be good for it. Yeah. But I'm not alone. I think I just saw a picture of Michael Che doing one last night in the back of a pickup truck, like in Long Island City.
Yeah.
We just want to do what we do, and we miss the microphone.
Yeah.
I think Rock said it. He said, "I miss you, microphone."
Yeah.
And when he was there with Andrew Cuomo, trying to convince people to wear masks more. But I think you miss all that. You miss that kind of let's just say this: every stand-up comedy, to interrupt myself, is a dialogue between the comedian and the audience, right? So all you ever want to do is be understood. That's why people are like, you ever notice this? You know what I mean? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's just that conversation. You just don't want to die knowing that you're nuts, you know what I mean? Or nuts by yourself.
Right.
At least everybody else sees this. They see this. So it's like with the isolation, there's been this inability to have that connection, even though so much of the world is absurd now. I mean, even more absurd than it ever was, I mean, I'm like, after this, what we're in now, right now, this burrito of doom. I mean, I look back on fonder days when I was in lockdown for COVID,
right?
When that was the only problem,
right?
Now it's just like, how much more sour cream can we put on this thing? But we're gonna find out.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say is, during those times, you would write, even if it was just in your head, you notice things, and you'd try to note them, write them down, keep track of them, because you're like, this would make a great joke, or that would make a great joke, or that would be really good, or that would be good. And that's just that's never going to go away.
Yeah.
It's just it's, you see the incongruities in our routines and our futile effort to control our world.
Right.
And you want to note it,
And when you're doing these like drive-in sets in the back of a pickup, like what's how's that even work? Like, are you on a PA system? Is it like when I go to the drive-in movies, you have to tune to like an FM radio station that's like just in the, like, are people listening to loudspeakers, or are they listening in their cars?
It's going to be a loudspeaker.
Okay.
And at the end, I'll be like, a vote for Carlos is a vote for a chicken in every pot. You know what I mean? Like, I'm hitting the trail. Then I'm gonna hit the Bronx. It's a tough district. But I think if you got to meet people where they're at. You understand? That's politics. That's the ground game. You got to get out there. So it's insane. We're like doing a whistle stop thing.
Yeah.
Like in the back of this diner while people are, hopefully not listening to like Sirius radio and tuning this out. But it's just, it's gonna be 10 minutes of glory. In fact, I think New York Magazine is coming to do like a little story about it, which would be really cool.
Yeah, nice.
Also, it's like I'm totally out of practice, and it would be nice just to knock the dust off this,
right?
Just a little bit and get back at it.
Have you done any of have you done any Zoom stand up or like just Instagram Live kind of stuff or any of that during this time?
I have done it, but it's a totally different medium,
right?
It's more of like, that feels like a funny FaceTime call with a friend,
right?
And because the box then is even smaller than television, right? There's a weird dissonance. Like I said, the people know that you've come to tell them jokes, right? But in a stand-up comedy club, it's just like, hey, how's it going? You can talk to the audience. You can break the fourth wall.
Right.
And this, it's just a wall of faces.
Yeah.
And you're like in this fucking panopticon, and you got to make it like, this is normal.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, everybody, like, I can see you. You can't see me, prisoners.
Right.
So, it's a tough shell to crack at first, and then you kind of get into it. Because sometimes I'll just be like, I'm going to do some jokes I'm gonna speak some jokes at you people, and that seems to work because I'm usually hosting it, and then I'll pass it to somebody else.
Gotcha.
That has at least had me to go out there first, bite the bullet, so to speak.
It's crazy. Have you thought about sort of the return to a club, like what that looks like, and just sort of your comfort level? Like, would you go up with a mask on? Would you go up if half the room is empty? Like, just that kind of, all the weird logistics of sort of reopening comedy clubs. Like,
sure, I've thought about, like, I wanted to tape a special this year, and I'm really excited to, if I do this special, I just get a giant gerbil ball and I come out on stage that way. What do you think?
So you're encased. You're like a bubble boy for the whole thing.
Absolutely, do a bubble boy. But then I come out, because people they wear of that. You know what I'm saying? So they get a little, a little tired of that. And then I jump out. I do at least 3 hazmat changes during the show. I'm talking puke yellow, orange, white. Everybody likes, like, keep them guessing. I feel like it will come back slowly. And I do believe, I'm morally superior, so I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
Namely, The Daily with Michael Barbaro. He's my favorite. Him and Ira Glass, favorite high-pitched men ever. So, Michael Barbaro has this guy on, and he's talking about, one of the episodes is called The Hammer and the Dance. And he said that people are going to come out into public life without any vaccine.
Yep.
Then we're literally going to see people get sick, and then we're going to be like, okay, everybody back indoors.
Yeah.
So it's got to be this give and take, and until we're, I don't know, maybe dunzo. if that's a technical term from Dr. Ouchie Fauci, dunzo. I won't feel completely comfortable.
Yeah.
Playing before a large crowd. But then again, when did I ever? There were so much is in the race to kill you in America.
Yeah.
I was always like, I'd do college shows, and I'd be like, this is when it's going to happen. This is when somebody's going to go crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Incel dudes is going to run in here. I swear to God, they're going to come in. And it would always be like, I'd do my hour, and I'd be quick in, quick out. I'd be in the wind. You know what I mean? I'd be in the wind. I'd be like, good luck, kids.
Yeah.
I got to go.
Right.
But now college isn't even a thing anymore, so it's fine. But I don't know. I've been in New York so long. I survived September 11th, the blackout, the brownout, Sandy, Irene, Giuliani. And I'm here, man. You know, even after COVID, I'm here.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I don't know when things are gonna be back, but like you say, maybe at some point you just need to, I don't know, put on your big boy pants and just go out into the world.
Go out in the world, get sick and die.
Yeah.
So let me ask you though.
Yeah.
But this old house, I mean, how will this old house keep making, modifications to old houses in this world of COVID?
So it's funny. I got laid off at the beginning of all this. So I'm out of work right now. I'm not with them anymore. So I don't know specifically what their plans are for this year. I mean, it's a weird thing because the construction industry, at least in Massachusetts, is still able to continue. So a lot of the people I used to work with, I see on Instagram and stuff, they're out at job sites every day and, still renovating houses that, they had for private clients. But TV production can't happen, so there's not TV crews following them. So I don't know where it's going to end up for with this old house in particular. I know HGTV is doing they're trying to do Zoom renovation shows, which that just feels really weird and not compelling.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I mean, and it's weird for me too, just trying to think about being out of work now for 3 months. If I got a call for a job tomorrow. If somebody said, hey, we've got this thing that we just have to, a hospital wants to do a thing on COVID and they need a crew to come out and shoot it, would I go? And, I got 2 little kids. I got a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. So that plays into it, obviously. But I feel like it's still going to be a while before I'm super comfortable just being around a million people. I don't know.
Oh, of course. I was never comfortable in the first place.
Yeah. Right.
And now this?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I know what you mean, man. They're my agent was like, oh yeah, man, clubs in Alabama and Florida and Georgia on the Florida Georgia line they're like, screw it, you know, like, and I was like, okay, yeah, but you know, man, the Florida Georgia line, like, is this my crowd, man?
Right.
You know, like, hey, nothing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with Riviera, but you know, I feel that I know who likes my stuff, you know, and I just don't know if it's Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a weird time, as we all know it, but I think that that's a bit of the adventure in it all, you know, and I kind of like that, but yeah, there's obviously some decisions will have to be made, and this is probably the hardest moment in my life that I've ever gone through, you know. So, and I'm sure it's that way for a lot of people. However, like comedy, what the best part of it, if there are any best parts, is that it's universal. It is happening to all of us.
Right. From
the crisis with following the death of George Floyd to COVID-19, no one is spared of these crises. Now, we're all in the same shitstorm. We might not all be in the same boat, but we're definitely all in the same storm.
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
So that gives me hope when I do comedy. It's because that I don't think I've had more in common with my neighbors than I've had now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's people just having talks about like race,
right?
Like my neighbors, and they do not talk about race. Yeah, man, you know.
Well,
you get it.
Yeah, no, totally. But I'm with you on the hope piece of it, and just that we are all in this together, and you know, hopefully it all it's a learning something for all of us, I guess. You know.
Oh my God, I hope so. I hope some lessons stay with Americans after this. Like, Jesus, God, please let it just. Somebody, you know, come on, jackhammer it into your skull. Like, we need to care for each other. We need to be empathetic towards each other.
Yep.
You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. And when your leadership is being divisive, we have to come together as a people to get through crises. You know, that's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know?
Just, see the humanity in each other. And just, like you said, we're all in it together. And that it applies to COVID, but it applies to life, man, right? Like we're all on this little planet, and let's just figure out how to get along with each other.
I mean, for God's sakes, you know, like, we're not going to be here long. I don't know how long I have here. And there's no, you know, it's just like they used to say to me when I was a Boy Scout, you're just borrowing things for a little while. So please handle them with respect and handle them delicately for the next person that comes along.
All right, Jordan Carlos covered a lot of ground there. He's man, he is smart. He's funny. He's got so many different angles on all this, and I'm really happy that I was able to talk to him. That was fun. Go follow Jordan on Twitter at Jordan Carlos. He's got information there about his spec script writing class at the Pit in New York City. Again, he's a writer on First Wives Club on BET. And if you're able to dig up old episodes of The Nightly Show or old segments even on YouTube, go watch some of them. It's such a great show. Larry Wilmore is so great on it. And I got to say, too, if you're a fan of Larry's, go listen to his podcast, Black on the Air. Larry's just so good at breaking down the news. And even though he's not on our TV every night, he does have a podcast maybe once or twice a month that where he shares the same perspective that he would have on The Nightly Show. So, go listen to Larry's podcast as well, and go follow Jordan. Speaking of following, you can follow me. I'm at Heath Racela on Twitter and Instagram. And thanks for joining me for another episode of Quarantine Creatives. Got a new one coming on Monday. Make sure you subscribe so you get that first in your feed. Other than that, enjoy your weekend. Stay safe.